He disguised himself to test employees' loyalty. Their greed shocked him. He fired every single one. The opulent boardroom of Omnicorp, a testament to technological prowess and global ambition, hummed with a tension far thicker than the usual pre-quarterly report jitters. Kalen Thorne, or rather, the frail figure known to the room as Arthur, the janitor, stood by the gleaming mahogany table, a worn dust rag clutched in his trembling hand. He had just finished wiping down a spill, a task he performed countless times in this very room, observing, listening, meticulously gathering the evidence that would now bring this sordid chapter to a close. His eyes, though dulled by expertly applied prosthetics and a feigned cataract, gleamed with a sharpness none in the room could discern. A faint smile, one of deep, bitter satisfaction, played on his lips, hidden by the downward curve of his aged face. The scent of polished wood and stale ambition filled the air, a familiar aroma that now, ironically, felt profoundly foreign to the man who had built this empire. He moved with a practiced slowness, each deliberate shuffle a calculated step towards their impending revelation. Serafina Vance, head of marketing, her impeccably tailored suit a second skin, barely glanced at the old man. Her gaze, cold and calculating, was fixed on Jackson Rook, the head of sales, who leaned back in his chair, a smug smirk playing on his lips, a palpable sense of triumph emanating from him. Alara Finch, the long-serving executive assistant, a woman whose face was perpetually set in an expression of mild disgust for anything she deemed beneath her, was already tapping away on her tablet, dismissing Arthur's presence entirely, as if he were merely an inconvenient shadow. The soft clicking of her nails on the screen was the loudest sound in the room, a testament to her oblivious self-absorption. "Gentlemen," and Serafina, Arthur's voice, raspy and deliberately shaky, cut through the quiet hum of the room, a sound so unexpected it caused Jackson to jolt slightly, his posture briefly losing its studied nonchalance. Kalen watched the flicker of annoyance cross Jackson's face, a familiar disdain for anything that disrupted his carefully curated superiority. "The game, it seems, is over." A beat of stunned silence. Then, a ripple of condescending chuckles, thin and brittle. Serafina's lips curled into a sneer, her perfectly made-up face contorting with amusement. "Did you hear that, Jackson?" Serafina's voice, a silk whip, snapped through the air, dripping with an almost theatrical mockery. "Old Arthur here thinks he's part of the executive meeting. Perhaps he's finally lost it entirely." Her gaze lingered on Arthur, a flicker of genuine contempt in her eyes, as if the very sight of him offended her aesthetic sensibilities. Jackson let out a booming laugh, devoid of humor, a forced, performative sound. "Perhaps he's trying to clean up our mess, Serafina? Don't worry, Arthur, we'll handle the big numbers. You just stick to the dust bunnies." He paused, leaning forward with feigned concern, a grotesque parody of empathy. "Are you feeling all right, old man? You're looking a bit confused." The insult was carefully veiled, designed to mock Arthur's perceived senility while reinforcing their positions of power. Alara didn't even bother to look up, her fingers flying across her tablet. Honestly, why do they keep these temporary hires around? He's more of a liability than a help. Just finish your dusting and get out, Arthur. We have important matters to discuss, not listen to senile ramblings. Her words were delivered with a dismissive wave of her hand, her eyes still glued to the screen, completely oblivious to the magnitude of her condescension. The irony was so palpable, so exquisitely bitter, it could have been tasted on the tongue. Here they were, surrounded by the very opulence their greed had fostered, mocking the man who had built it all, the architect of their sudden, irreversible downfall. Kalen Thorne, the self-made titan of industry, felt a cold satisfaction spread through him, a deep, cleansing chill. They still had no idea. The true mess, he knew, was not on the pristine floor, but within their corrupted souls. And he was indeed there to clean it up, albeit in a way they could never have imagined. His heart, once heavy with disillusionment, now pulsed with a quiet, determined rhythm. The boardroom doors opened then, a soft, almost imperceptible whoosh, and in walked Lyra Soul, the young junior data analyst, her shoulders slightly slumped with a weariness Kalen recognized from long, unrewarded hours. She clutched a stack of reports tightly to her chest, her fingers white-knuckled. She offered Arthur a small, tired smile as she passed, her eyes meeting his for a fleeting second, a silent acknowledgement of his humanity, a gesture that, in this den of avarice, shone like a beacon. It was a simple, fleeting moment, yet for Kalen, it was profoundly significant. The contrast was stark, vivid, and deeply satisfying. The moment of reckoning had arrived. How had it come to this? How had Kalen Thorne, a a man who had built a multi-billion-dollar empire from the ground up with nothing but an idea, relentless drive, and an unwavering belief in integrity, found himself disguised as a shuffling, senile janitor in his own company. The answer lay in a creeping disillusionment, a slow, agonizing erosion of trust that had gnawed at his very core over the past few years. It was a betrayal not just of him, but of the very spirit of Omnicorp. At 68, Kalin should have been enjoying the fruits of his labor, overseeing Omnicorp from a comfortable distance, perhaps dabbling in philanthropy or writing his memoirs. His personal wealth was astronomical, his reputation sterling. Yet, he was haunted by whispers, by the increasingly frequent reports that painted a grim picture of his beloved company, reports that always seemed to be sugar-coated before they reached his desk. Morale, once Omnicorp's proudest asset, was plummeting, evidenced by the rising number of anonymous complaints and the palpable tension in the air during his infrequent visits. Employee surveys, once glowing with enthusiastic feedback, now hinted at a toxic culture of fear and favoritism, a stark departure from the open-door policy he had championed. And the worst of it? The subtle, then not so subtle, signs of corporate greed infecting the very top echelons, like a virulent disease spreading through the company's bloodstream. Kalin remembered the early days, the profound hunger for innovation that had driven him. He had spent countless nights hunched over a flickering monitor in a cramped garage, fueled by cheap ramen noodles and an unshakable vision. Omnicorp was built on the principles of innovation, hard work, and a profound respect for every individual, from the lowest intern to the highest executive. He had prided himself on knowing the names of most of his employees, on fostering a sense of shared purpose. He had preached a philosophy of meritocracy, where talent and dedication were rewarded, and integrity was non-negotiable. He believed in fostering a family, not just a workforce, where mutual respect and shared values were the true currency. The company's success, he often said, was a direct reflection of its collective character. But time, and perhaps unchecked power, had a way of corrupting. The initial reports of malaise were dismissed as isolated incidents, growing pains of a rapidly expanding global giant. He had wanted to believe that, to cling to the idealized image of his company. Yet, the evidence mounted. A new, lavish marketing campaign approved by Serafina Vance, costing millions more than initially budgeted, yielded questionable returns, yet was aggressively defended by Serafina herself as a visionary investment. Kalin recalled a specific instance where Serafina had pushed for an extravagant launch party in Monaco, justifying it as essential for brand visibility, despite internal data suggesting a more targeted, cost-effective approach would be far more beneficial. Whispers of Jackson Rook's aggressive sales tactics, bordering on unethical, became louder, tales of him strong-arming clients into unnecessary upgrades and blatantly disregarding client satisfaction once a deal was closed. Kalin had even received an anonymous complaint detailing how Jackson had threatened a junior salesperson's bonus if they didn't bend the truth to meet an impossible quota. And Alara Finch, his long-serving executive assistant, once a paragon of efficiency and discretion, had devolved into a bitter, gossipy gatekeeper whose disdain for anyone she deemed unimportant was legendary. She had started subtly sabotaging the careers of those she disliked, denying them access or losing their important documents. Kalin saw the change in her eyes, a hardening that replaced the genuine spark he once saw. Kalin had tried the traditional routes. He called meetings, issued memos, commissioned internal audits. But the reports were always sanitized, the problems whitewashed, the blame deflected with masterful corporate jargon. His executives, the very people he had entrusted with his legacy, met his concerns with placating smiles and empty promises, their eyes betraying a deeper indifference, a bored dismissal. They were too far removed, too comfortable in their gilded cages, to understand the rot setting in. Or perhaps they simply didn't care. He felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just for himself, but for the company's original spirit, for the thousands of dedicated employees who still believed in Omnicorp's founding values, for the hopeful faces he used to see in the halls. One particularly galling incident solidified his resolve, setting him on this audacious path. A whistleblower, a mid-level manager named David Chin, had bravely submitted a detailed report alleging widespread embezzlement through a complex web of shell companies, implicating several high-ranking individuals including names Kalin recognized from the executive committee. Kalin had personally guaranteed David's safety and anonymity, promising a thorough investigation and protection. Yet, within weeks, The report mysteriously vanished from secure servers, the digital breadcrumbs expertly erased. David Chin, instead of being praised for his courage, was quietly transferred to a remote, dead-end division in a different country, his career effectively neutralized. And the alleged perpetrators? They continued their work unmolested. Some even received promotions, their brazenness a slap in Kalen's face. It was then that Kalen understood with chilling clarity. He couldn't trust anyone on the inside to investigate. The corruption ran deeper than he had dared to imagine. He needed to see it for himself, from the ground up, where the masks were most likely to slip, where the truth would be unvarnished and raw. The idea of disguising himself struck him like a bolt of lightning during a sleepless night, a desperate, unconventional solution born of utter frustration. Who better to observe the true culture of the company than someone completely invisible, someone dismissed and overlooked by everyone who mattered? A janitor. A frail, elderly, seemingly senile janitor. It was perfect in its audacity. No one, absolutely no one, would suspect the founder of Omnicorp to be pushing a mop bucket through its gleaming corridors. The thought was both liberating and terrifying. He spent weeks meticulously planning his transformation, every detail considered with the same precision he applied to his corporate strategies. A trusted, discreet team of specialists, sworn to secrecy, helped him with the physical metamorphosis. Prosthetics were applied to subtly alter his facial structure, adding years and creating faint lines of exhaustion. Special makeup gave his skin a sallow, aged appearance, dimming the healthy glow he once possessed. Contact lenses subtly clouded his sharp gaze, giving it a perpetually bewildered, unfocused quality. He practiced for hours, perfecting a shuffling gait, a slight tremor in his hands, and a perpetually bewildered expression that would invite dismissal rather than scrutiny. His wardrobe was carefully chosen, worn, ill-fitting uniforms from a discount store, smelling faintly of cheap detergent, far removed from his bespoke suits. He even had a fake ID and employment records created through a temporary agency, ensuring no direct link to Omnicorp's HR system. He became Arthur, a man past his prime, brought in for menial tasks, easily dismissed, utterly invisible. He shed Kalen Thorne, the Titan, and embraced Arthur, the Ghost, leaving the keys to his penthouse apartment and his luxury car with his most trusted, long-serving personal assistant, Sarah, instructing her to maintain his public appearances with vague excuses of a private retreat, and unforeseen health complications requiring privacy. Kalen Thorne stepped out of his gilded cage and into the unassuming uniform of a janitor. He was not just testing his employees, he was testing himself, his legacy, and the very soul of the company he had poured his life into. He would find out, once and for all, if Omnicorp was still the company he had built, or if it had truly become a monument to greed and moral decay. The stakes were higher than any quarterly report. Arthur's first week at Omnicorp was a descent into a world he had only vaguely understood from sanitized reports. The sheer volume of waste, both material and human, was staggering. Piles of discarded prototypes, perfectly usable equipment thrown out for the latest model, mountains of single-use plastics in the break rooms. But more horrifying was the human waste, the dismissed ideas, the ignored pleas for help, the stifled creativity, the quiet despair of hard-working individuals whose efforts were overlooked in favor of those with connections or loud voices. He moved through the gleaming hallways and bustling offices, a phantom, his mop bucket and cleaning cart serving as a shield of invisibility, a symbol of his lower status that paradoxically granted him unparalleled access. He observed, he listened, and with each passing day, his heart grew heavier, his initial skepticism hardening into an unyielding steel. The bitter truth was far worse than the whispers. His first direct encounter with the triumvirate of avarice came swiftly. On his second day, Arthur was assigned to clean the executive floor, a pristine realm of hushed tones and polished surfaces where the air itself seemed to hum with self-importance. He shuffled into Alara Finch's office, a cavernous space filled with expensive, minimalist furniture that felt more like a showroom than a workspace. Alara, perched behind her sleek desk, was on a video call, her voice dripping with venom, her face a mask of exasperation. "No, I don't care about Ms. Henderson's urgent query about her software bug," Alara snapped into the microphone, her eyes rolling dramatically, as if the very concept of a customer needing help was an affront to her existence. She needs to follow the protocol. And if she's struggling with the new interface, that's her problem, not ours. Honestly, the entitlement of some customers. Don't they know we have more important things to do than handhold them through basic functions? She scoffed, running a manicured hand through her perfectly coiffed hair, dismissing Ms. Henderson as if she were an annoying fly. Just tell her to resubmit her ticket through the portal. And make it clear, if she calls again, she'll be routed to the general support line, not direct to me. I'm not a help desk. Arthur, diligently wiping down the windowsill, could feel the disgust radiating from her, a palpable wave of arrogance. He overheard her gossiping with colleagues later in the executive lounge, dissecting the personal lives of junior staff members, mocking their modest salaries and aspirations, their attempts to secure promotions or better benefits. Can you believe young Roberts wants a raise after only 2 years? Alara cackled to a fellow assistant, her voice echoing with derision. He probably thinks he's entitled to a corner office already. He should be grateful he even has a job here. Some people just don't understand how things work. Her words were laced with a bitter contempt for anyone beneath her, a stark contrast to the company's original ethos of nurturing talent and rewarding hard work. Kalen felt a pang of regret, a deep, sickening lurch in his gut. He had promoted Alara himself, years ago, believing in her potential, her efficiency, her loyalty. How profoundly wrong he had been. Later that week, Arthur found himself cleaning Serafina Vance's sprawling marketing suite. The office was a monument to excess, designer furniture that looked more like art installations than functional pieces, abstract art that seemed designed solely to impress, and a vast collection of luxury bags displayed on open shelves, each one a silent testament to her extravagant tastes. As he emptied the waste bin, he heard Serafina on the phone, her voice lowered, conspiratorial, yet clear enough in the hushed office. Look, we can easily inflate the budget for the Q4 campaign by another 15%, she purred into the phone, her voice smooth as silk, utterly devoid of conscience. Who's going to notice? The numbers are so large, a little extra here and there just blends in. We'll funnel it through the miscellaneous vendor expenses account. A portion of it can go to that shell company we discussed, the one for creative consultants. And a little something for our troubles, of course. She laughed, a brittle, joyless sound that grated on Kalen's ears. Think of the new yacht, darling. It's practically paying for itself. Kalen's heart sank further, a cold, heavy stone in his chest. Embezzlement. Not just petty pilfering, but grand larceny, discussed openly, casually, as if it were a routine, acceptable part of business. He noted the specific accounts she mentioned, the subtle cues that could lead an investigator directly to the illicit scheme. Serafina, once hailed as a marketing genius, a visionary who could transform a brand, was now simply a sophisticated thief, her ambition having completely eclipsed her ethics, leaving behind a husk of integrity. Jackson Rook proved to be equally, if not more, repugnant. Arthur observed him in the break room, boasting loudly to a group of sales managers about a recent deal, his chest puffed out with an inflated sense of self-importance. I told them we'd deliver the software upgrades by end of month. Knowing full well our development team is swamped until next quarter, Jackson crowed. A smug grin plastered across his face, a glimmer of triumph in his eyes. But hey, the commission is in, right? Once the paperwork is signed, who cares if the client is screaming in 3 months? That's for customer service to deal with, not us. Our job is to close, and if that means bending the truth a little, so be it. It's not lying if they don't ask the right questions. His colleagues chuckled, some uncomfortably, shifting in their seats, others with genuine admiration for his audacious cynicism, mirroring his disregard for honesty. Kalen witnessed Jackson dismiss genuine customer concerns as trivial, even mocking their naivete, further cementing his belief that integrity had vanished from OmniCorp's sales division, replaced by a cutthroat, commission-driven culture. The contempt they held for Arthur himself was a constant, low-level thrum of disrespect, a continuous reminder of his manufactured invisibility. They would leave their offices in appalling disarray, expecting him to clean up after their personal messes without a second thought. Coffee cups overflowing with stale liquid, food wrappers strewn across expensive desks, even discarded, half-eaten meals left for him to dispose of, as if he were a personal waste receptacle. Serafina once deliberately dropped a file on the floor, watching it flutter down like a discarded thought, then snapped, "Pick that up, Arthur. Are your eyes going as bad as your memory?" Her voice was sharp, laced with an open disdain that stung, even through Kalen's layers of disguise. Jackson would bark orders at him, demanding fresh water or a cleaner chair, often adding a condescending, "Hurry up, old man, before you fall asleep on the job," his words delivered with a sneer. Alara would simply ignore him, sometimes walking through his freshly mopped areas, leaving muddy footprints without a single glance or apology, treating him as though he were an inanimate object, a part of the building's furniture. Each microaggression, each dismissive glance, solidified Kalen's resolve, adding fuel to the fire of his righteous anger. Amidst this swamp of avarice and callousness, a single, flickering light emerged, a beacon in the pervasive darkness. Her name was Lyra Soul, a junior data analyst, quiet and unassuming, easily overlooked by the more dominant personalities. Arthur first noticed her in the common area, huddled over her laptop, working diligently even during her lunch break, her brow furrowed in concentration. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with kind eyes that held a hint of weariness, a quiet strength that belied her seemingly fragile demeanor. One afternoon, as Arthur struggled to push a heavy recycling bin full of discarded paper, the wheels squeaking loudly under the strain, Lyra, without a moment's hesitation, rushed over, putting down her own lunch. "Here, let me help you with that, Arthur," she said softly, her voice gentle, taking the other handle of the bin. Her smile was warm, genuine, a stark contrast to the cold, professional facades he usually encountered. It wasn't pity, it was simple, unadulterated human kindness, an intuitive act of empathy. Another day, Arthur accidentally spilled a cleaning solution near her desk, a small puddle spreading across the floor. Before he could even apologize, his trembling hand fumbling for a cloth, Lyra quickly grabbed a tissue from her own desk and helped him wipe it up, kneeling beside him without a trace of hesitation or disgust. "No worries, Arthur," she said, her voice gentle, reassuring. "Accidents happen. Are you all right?" She even offered him a piece of her apple, a small gesture that meant the world to the disguised billionaire, a profound act of sharing that resonated deeply within him. She was the only one who consistently greeted him, who looked him in the eye, who offered a kind word or a thoughtful gesture. She'd ask if he needed anything, or if he was feeling tired, a genuine concern in her voice that was completely absent in others. Kalen noticed her own struggles, the late nights, the quiet sighs, the occasional worried glance at her phone, hinting at financial strain, perhaps medical bills for a family member. Yet, despite her own burdens, she maintained her empathy, her innate goodness shining through. She was the embodiment of everything Omnicorp was supposed to be, the living proof that its original values were not entirely lost. He observed her quiet resilience, her diligent work ethic, her willingness to stay late to fix errors, even those not her own. She never complained, never gossiped, simply focused on her tasks with a quiet determination. The final straw came during a particularly raucous executive gathering, thinly disguised as a team-building luncheon in one of Omnicorp's private dining rooms. The air was thick with the scent of expensive catered food and the loud chatter of self-congratulatory executives. Serafina, Jackson, and Alara were in a corner, their voices carrying easily over the clinking of cutlery and forced laughter. Arthur, collecting empty plates, heard every word, each syllable a dagger to his heart. "Did you hear about that new AI initiative Kalen's pushing?" Serafina scoffed, sipping from her champagne flute, her eyes rolling dismissively. "Honestly, the old man's losing his touch. He thinks technology can solve everything. He should just retire and let us run the show. He's out of touch with the real world of business." Jackson guffawed, his loud, obnoxious laugh filling the room. "He's stuck in the past, always talking about integrity and customer value. Doesn't he realize it's all about the bottom line now? You gotta squeeze every penny out of these suckers. That's how you get rich. That's how you build real power." He gestured with his fork, a piece of food flying through the air. Alara, ever the sharp-tongued one, her lips curled in a sneer, added, "And speaking of bottom lines, I heard his personal assistant is doing a terrible job covering for him. She said he's on a meditative retreat. More like he's senile and hiding in some retirement home, probably drooling into his soup." She snickered, then lowered her voice slightly, leaning in conspiratorially. "But while he's gone, we can push through those revised expense reports, right, Serafina? Nobody's scrutinizing them too closely these days, with the old man out of the picture." The casual way they discussed embezzling company funds, mocking Kalen's vision, and disparaging his health, all while his disguised form stood mere feet away, collecting their discarded plates, was a profound shock. It wasn't just greed. It was a deep-seated contempt for the very values he had built the company on, a cynical dismissal of everything he held dear. The disgust festered within Kalen, turning into a cold, hard resolve. He had seen enough. The proof was irrefutable. His company was indeed infected, and the time had come for a radical surgery, a cleansing fire. There was no going back now. The day of reckoning arrived, cloaked in the guise of OmniCorp's highly anticipated quarterly shareholders meeting. The grand auditorium, usually reserved for keynote speeches and major announcements, was packed. Investors, board members, and key executives filled the seats, a sea of expectant faces, buzzing with anticipation for the usual financial projections and corporate platitudes. Serafina, Jackson, and Alara sat prominently in the front row, exuding an air of self-importance and anticipation, ready to take credit for the sanitized reports that had been carefully prepared. They were utterly unaware that this meeting, seemingly ordinary, was about to become the stage for their dramatic, public downfall. Kalen Thorne, as Arthur, had spent the entire morning preparing the room, meticulously arranging chairs, wiping down every surface until it gleamed, and ensuring every detail was perfect, a silent, meticulous ritual. He wore his worn uniform, his movements deliberately slow and deliberate, drawing no attention, a ghost among the busy staff. He even shuffled past Serafina, who pointedly ignored him, her eyes fixed on her phone. He passed Alara, who waved him away with a dismissive flick of her wrist when he approached to wipe her table. Jackson, busy on his phone, didn't even acknowledge his presence, lost in his own world of self-importance. The irony was exquisite, a sharp, delightful pang. The architect of their impending ruin was literally sweeping the floor around them, his true identity utterly invisible. The meeting began with a series of routine reports, the usual ebb and flow of corporate speak. Then, the chairman of the board, a man Kalen had personally appointed years ago, cleared his throat, his voice resonating through the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move to the next agenda item, we have a very special, unannounced presentation. It comes at the behest of our founder, Mr. Kalen Thorne, who, despite being on a private retreat, wishes to address a matter of utmost importance to OmniCorp's future. A ripple of murmurs went through the room, a confused wave of whispers. Serafina exchanged a confused glance with Jackson, a frown creasing her perfect brow. Alara scoffed, a tiny, disdainful sound. Another video message, she whispered, loud enough for those around her to hear, her tone dripping with contempt. He must be really losing it if he can't even appear in person for this. What a spectacle. But it wasn't a video message. The large, intricately carved double doors at the back of the auditorium suddenly swung open with a theatrical flourish, a deliberate, dramatic gesture. All eyes turned, drawn by the sudden movement and the unexpected shaft of light. Standing there, bathed in the sudden spotlight, was not the shuffling janitor they knew, but a figure of immense gravitas. He was impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored suit, the fabric a rich, dark hue that seemed to absorb the light, emphasizing his powerful silhouette. His silver hair, once disheveled and dull, was neatly combed, gleaming under the lights. His eyes, no longer clouded by prosthetics, were sharp and piercing, surveying the room with an almost predatory intensity. He carried himself with an undeniable authority, a presence that commanded instant respect, radiating power and purpose. It was Kalen Thorne. A collective gasp swept through the room, a wave of stunned realization. Disbelief, shock, and a dawning horror flickered across the faces of Serafina, Jackson, and Alara. Their eyes widened, their mouths fell agape, their carefully constructed veneers of composure crumbling into dust. They stared, pale and trembling, as if confronted by a ghost. The man who had just emptied their wastebaskets, the old man they had mocked and dismissed, was their CEO, their founder, their ultimate authority. Their entire world tilted on its axis, shattering around them. Kalen began to walk down the central aisle, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence, deliberate and unhurried. He paused just before the front row, his gaze sweeping over the now pale, terrified faces of Serafina, Jackson, and Alara. He saw the recognition, the terror, the dawning comprehension, the dawning shame. He saw their carefully constructed masks crack, revealing the raw fear beneath. "Good morning," Kalen's voice, strong and resonant, filled the auditorium, utterly devoid of the raspy tremor of Arthur. His words cut through the tension like a sharp blade. I apologize for my unconventional entrance, but sometimes, to truly see, one must first become invisible. His eyes fixed on the trio, holding their terrified gazes. For the past month, I have had the unique privilege of working among you, not as your CEO, but as Arthur, your janitor. A fresh wave of gasps, louder this time, erupted, an audible ripple of shock. Murmurs escalated into an excited babble as the revelation sunk in, spreading like wildfire through the audience. Lyra Soul, who had been sitting quietly a few rows back, her eyes wide with shock, instinctively covered her mouth with her hand, her mind racing. She remembered offering Arthur her apple, helping him with the heavy recycling bin, asking if he was okay. The thought that she had interacted so casually with Kalen Thorne, the legendary founder, the man whose face adorned the company's annual reports, was almost too much to process, a dizzying revelation. Kalen raised a hand, silencing the crowd instantly, his authority undeniable. During my time as Arthur, I observed. I listened. And what I saw, what I heard, was deeply disturbing. His voice hardened, steeling himself for the inevitable confrontation, his posture radiating unyielding resolve. He looked directly at Serafina, Jackson, and Alara, whose faces were now sickly pale, their eyes darting wildly. I witnessed a profound departure from the values upon which Omnicorp was built. I saw greed. I saw disrespect. I saw unethical practices openly discussed and celebrated, as if they were virtues. He paused, letting his words sink in, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle upon the stunned audience. Serafina Vance, he began, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel, precise and unforgiving. Your creative consultant, accounts, and inflated marketing budgets are a meticulously documented trail of embezzlement. The yachts, the lavish spending, they won't be paying for themselves anymore. Serafina visibly flinched, her jaw dropping, a small, choked gasp escaping her lips. Her carefully cultivated composure shattered, revealing a raw, panicked fear. Jackson Rook, Kalen continued, turning his gaze, his eyes burning with an icy fire. Your aggressive sales tactics, your blatant disregard for client satisfaction, your exploitation of loopholes, and the junior staff you boast about deceiving are not just unethical. They are a direct assault on Omnicorp's reputation and future, eroding the trust we spent decades building. Jackson's smug smirk had vanished entirely, replaced by a look of sheer terror. He tried to speak, his lips moving, but no words came out, only a dry, rasping sound. His face was ashen. And Alara Finch, Kalen's voice softened, but with an underlying current of profound disappointment, a deep sadness for a loyalty lost. Your bitter disdain for those you perceive as unimportant, your gossip, your deliberate obstruction of customer concerns, your active participation in covering up illicit activities, your years of service will not shield you from the consequences of your moral decay. Alara's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes, not of remorse, but of humiliated rage, her body trembling uncontrollably. The evidence is overwhelming, Kalen declared, his voice rising, filling the room with an undeniable authority that left no room for doubt. And it was all gathered firsthand. By me. He gestured to the side of the stage, where two stern-faced security officers and a legal team, led by Omnicorp's chief legal officer, stepped forward, their expressions grim and determined. Effective immediately, Serafina Vance, Jackson Rook, and Alara Finch are terminated from Omnicorp. Their company assets are frozen, and a full forensic audit of all their activities within the company will commence immediately, with legal action to follow for restitution and damages. The auditorium erupted in a cacophony of gasps, whispers, and shocked exclamations. The three antagonists, their faces a mask of disbelief and horror, were already being approached by security, their protests futile, their denials swallowed by the roar of the crowd. Their carefully constructed worlds had just imploded, publicly, spectacularly, and irrevocably. The aftermath was swift and brutal for the disgraced trio. Serafina Vance, accustomed to a life of luxury beyond imagination, found her accounts frozen, her credit cards declined, her meticulously curated lifestyle abruptly collapsing. Her opulent apartment, filled with designer clothes, expensive art, and antique furniture, was suddenly a liability as legal proceedings for restitution began, demanding the return of every ill-gotten gain. The new yacht she had dreamed of, the one paying for itself through embezzlement, was repossessed before she could even step foot on its polished deck. Her reputation, meticulously crafted over years of ruthless ambition and carefully managed PR, was shattered, her name synonymous with corporate fraud, a public pariah. She received no severance, no golden parachute, just the cold, hard reality of public humiliation, impending financial ruin, in the stark glare of a merciless legal system. The woman who had scoffed at the entitlement of others now felt herself utterly entitled to everything she had lost, bewildered by the sudden, brutal shift in her fortunes, unable to comprehend that her actions had consequences. Jackson Rook, whose arrogance had been his defining trait, a shield and a weapon against anyone who challenged him, found his extensive network of contacts evaporate overnight. The very people he had boasted to, the junior staff he had exploited and threatened, now turned their backs on him, their silence a powerful condemnation. His aggressive tactics, once admired as resourcefulness and bold leadership by those who benefited from his schemes, were now seen for what they truly were: manipulative, destructive, and ultimately self-serving. His personal wealth, accumulated through questionable deals and inflated commissions, was seized as part of the ongoing investigation, leaving him financially crippled. He tried desperately to get a job at a competitor or even a smaller firm, only to find himself blacklisted, his name tainted beyond repair in the industry. The man who scoffed at integrity now understood, too late, its true, undeniable value. Alara Finch, perhaps the most pathetic of the three, retreated into a bitter, isolated shell. Her years of service, which she had wielded like a weapon against junior employees, using it to justify her disdain and power, had come to nothing. She lost her pension, her benefits, and her carefully cultivated social standing, replaced by an endless stream of legal notices and public scorn. The gossipy nature she had reveled in, using it to control and manipulate those around her, now turned viciously against her, as whispers and rumors about her own downfall spread like wildfire, painting her as the bitter, petty tyrant she truly was. She found herself utterly alone, ostracized by the very colleagues she had once lorded over, despised by those she had once tormented. Her disdain for the unimportant had ironically rendered her utterly insignificant, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. While the antagonists faced the precipice of their self-inflicted ruin, Lyra's soul found her life irrevocably transformed. She had watched the entire reveal from her seat in the auditorium, her mind reeling, her heart pounding. The quiet, kind janitor, Arthur, the one she had shared an apple with, was Kalen Thorne, the legendary founder of Omnicorp. The realization had hit her like a physical blow, leaving her breathless with shock and a profound sense of awe. She replayed every small interaction, every kind word she had exchanged with him, seeing them now through a new, astonishing lens. A few days later, Lyra received a summons to Kalen Thorne's actual executive office, a grand space she had only ever seen in glossy company videos, a symbol of ultimate power and prestige. She entered, trembling slightly, to find Kalen sitting behind his massive, polished desk, a warm, genuine smile on his face. He was no longer the frail Arthur, but his eyes, clear and sharp, held the same kindness she had seen in the janitor's, a steady, empathetic gaze. The transformation was complete, yet the essence of the man remained. "Lyra," Kalen began, his voice gentle, inviting. "Please sit." He gestured to a comfortable leather chair opposite him. Lyra cautiously sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Mr. Thorne, I don't know what to say. I can't believe it was you. All this time." Kalen chuckled softly, a genuine sound that filled the expansive office. "And I can't believe your unwavering kindness, Lyra. While others saw a frail old man, a nuisance, someone to be ignored or dismissed, you saw a human being. You treated me with respect, offered help when I struggled, even shared your lunch. That, Lyra, is the true spirit of Omnicorp, the spirit I thought we had lost entirely." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "I also observed your work, Lyra. Your diligence, your keen analytical mind, your quiet dedication to truth and accuracy, even when it meant longer hours or more difficult tasks. And your integrity, which shone brightly even when you yourself were under pressure, dealing with your own personal burdens. It's clear you're exactly the kind of person Omnicorp needs, now more than ever, to rebuild. Lyra listened, tears welling in her eyes, a mix of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. She thought of her own struggles, the mounting medical bills for her ailing mother, the countless late nights trying to make ends meet, the quiet despair she often felt. She had simply tried to be a good person, a good employee, and it had gone unnoticed, or so she thought. "I am offering you a new position, Lyra," Kalen announced, his voice firm but kind, imbued with authority. "Head of our new Internal Ethics and Values Oversight Department. You will report directly to me. Your first task will be to help us rebuild our corporate culture from the ground up, ensuring that integrity, respect, and hard work are not just words on a mission statement, but living principles embodied by every employee. And to aid you in this, to allow you to focus entirely on this vital work without personal worries, I'm also providing you with a substantial financial bonus." He mentioned a figure that made Lyra's jaw drop, a sum that would change her life, and her mother's, forever, alleviating all their financial burdens in an instant. Lyra, overwhelmed, could only nod, tears streaming down her face, a silent testament to the magnitude of the moment. She had never dreamed of such an opportunity, such a reward for simply being herself, for choosing kindness in a world that often rewarded cold ambition and cutthroat tactics. It was a vindication of every quiet act of decency. Months later, Omnicorp had begun its painful, yet ultimately revitalizing, transformation. The culture of fear and greed was slowly being purged, replaced by a renewed emphasis on transparency, meritocracy, and employee well-being. Kalen Thorne, no longer disguised, moved through the hallways, his visible presence a constant reminder of the consequences of corruption and the profound rewards of integrity. He often found himself exchanging a knowing smile with Lyra, who now walked with a newfound confidence, her department already making significant strides in restoring trust within the company. She was exactly as Kalen had envisioned, a beacon of ethical leadership, a testament to the power of a single kind heart, radiating the very values he had once thought lost. Kalen Thorne knew that the path to complete redemption for Omnicorp would be long, requiring constant vigilance and effort, but he also knew it was possible. He had seen the worst of humanity within his own walls, the depths to which greed could sink, but he had also witnessed the best, the unwavering light of compassion. And that, he realized, was the true measure of a company, and indeed, of any individual. It is in the darkest moments, when no one is watching, when there is no perceived reward or consequence, that true character is revealed. For those who chose avarice and cruelty, a reckoning always awaited. But for those who, like Lyra, chose kindness, empathy, and integrity, even in the face of their own struggles, the universe, in its own mysterious way, had a profound and beautiful reward in store. Goodness, after all, always finds its way to the light. If you found this story of hidden identities and shocking reveals captivating, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next tale of justice and transformation. What did you think of Kalen's extreme test? Do you believe his actions were justified? And if you were in Lyra's shoes, what would be the first thing you'd do with your newfound opportunity? Let us know in the comments below.